Welcome to World's 2023 draft analysis featuring BDS versus Team Wales. Let's do a quick intro of the two teams for the uninitiated. Team Wales is the latest to come out of the VCS, coming in as the number 2 seed for the World's plans. Everyone's new to the world stage here, except for Bean J, who has entered with Vietnam before, and the GOAT mentor coach SOFM, who you might have known from his Rengar and Spellbook in Italy in Worlds 2020. Team BDS are the 4th seed coming from the LEC and are fresh from shipping Golden Guardians back home to North America. Let's hop into game 1. From a draft perspective, it's really fun to watch two teams like this because Viet teams love to draft super aggressive and play that way as well. BDS has also just been wild overall with his picks, actually throwing a lot of teams off guard and giving them some issues. Teams are also still prioritizing different things as we see reflected in the bans. This game there's a heavy focus on jungle, which actually makes this B1 rel a pretty important take in my opinion. Note that teams are basically thinking about the R1, R2, and the B2, B3 with these bans, as we even see them go as deep as banning Orianna, which is a common blind for a lot of teams right now. Since BDS also banned Xayah on blue, breaking the popular Xayah Rakan R1, R2, the Whales opt for Renekton Rakan as their 1-2 instead. This is where they lean into Chadam's champion pool, allowing him to slam the Darius and securing Ezreal for Crowny in this case. At first, I think it felt sort of weird to be blinding Ezreal in this slot, but in order to hold off their rel flex and push mid to later, it makes sense. This undeniably leaves Ezreal up for potential abuse as the Whales counter with Kai'Sa. At this point, it's relatively established that Wales want to play forward here with the Kai'Sa lock and BDS want to play backward. To be honest, I think this is where Wales kind of messed up their ordering this game because of the fact that the Kai'Sa kind of indicates to BDS what they want to do. So the second phase bans are actually pretty easy. Wales even know it because they ban out champs that could stop their attack as well. This is also reflected in the Nico R4, which I would actually consider to be less revealing of a blind than the Kai'Sa would have been. You could argue that Kai'Sa would have been banned in phase 2 otherwise, but I'm really a firm believer that there's a lot of good ADCs available in this meta that have not been tapped into as of yet, like Jhin, Ashe, or even Vayne in a game against a champ like Darius. The rest of the champs are relatively uninteresting, so let's just call it a draft here. The only important piece is the R5 jungle that Wales ended up going for. In this meta, jungle should pretty much never be picked any later than first phase because of the fact that they all basically do the same thing. This is probably going to be the role that's the most boring for all of Worlds because we're just going to see Maokai, Sejuani, Lee Sin, Viego, just generic junglers that can do it all. If this is what we're establishing, what I'd like to see teams go for is to just acknowledge this and hedge early so they don't get target banned in phase 2. So this is partially why I think this game 1 draft goes to BDS. They are leaning into their strongest flexibility in draft, being Adam, forcing a disgusting matchup on top side and then being able to push his teammates back later in the draft to get more resources. They effectively got counterpick in every role but jungle, which is as good as you can get in a blue side draft. In competitive, being able to have lanes to play through and a ticket to an early lead is really often what gets you a win, and BDS drafts can do this with really unconventional strategy. In game 2, Wales opt to go red side again. The only adjustment in first phase is a Darius ban, which actually triggers BDS into a Renekton B1. While this is good in a vacuum, I'd say, remember what I said about BDS's strength. We need to lean into Adam's ability to gain draft advantage. Sure, Darius is banned here, but if we know anything about Adam, he's got things like Garen and the Olaf, champs that can still destroy a normie champ like Renekton. In my opinion, BDS could open other champs that are equally prioritized but lean into this, like the Rakan or even just opening Rel again. Wales open Kai'Sa again, and then counter the Renekton with K'Sante. While I don't like the Kai'Sa line that much because I don't really think she's strong enough to do so, the important thing here is the K'Sante, a neutralizing matchup for Wales on top side. The reason they lost last game was because they could not keep Adam under control to play for this Kai'Sa. You can kind of see this be reflected because the draft goes the same for the most part. Directionally, BDS has a good comp, but because of this fact, and due to speccing a low damage comp, it's really hard for BDS to have that same oomph that they did in game 1 and just smash open an advantage. In game 3, BDS tried to adjust the dynamic of the draft by banning Kai'Sa instead of Xayah, and Wales maintained their Darius ban. The concept behind this makes sense. If Wales like playing forward like this, putting pressure on them to stylistically play Xayah instead might change their dynamic, but the issue remains the same. BDS prioritized Renekton here, which is again neutralized by K'Sante, and then BDS has the same type of draft all over again. Wales opt for a spicy B4, B5 this time with like the Lee Sin LeBlanc, which is much needed for them since they need pressure on the map with both the bot and top neutralized. LeBlanc is pretty bad on this patch right now, I'd say, but this sort of emphasizes the necessity of having a strong laning champ in Wales' comp. It's the perfect facilitator to help them transition into these mid-game teamfights where they otherwise have no pressure on the map. Let's look again at BDS's comp. It's the same issues as Game 2 in my opinion. They're clearly a top focused team, but their team ironically cannot gather the same value from Renekton like other teams can, so it ended up just being their crutch. I'd like to see the adaptation of potentially allowing other rules like mid-jungle to blind more consistently for BDS, so that Adam can be pushed back to rely on these counter picks. That is likely their biggest draft fallacy in this meta. I don't think Team Wales was perfect either. Their draft, along with many drafts from other teams in Worlds, can totally be exploited, and I'd love to see BDS make this adaptation for their run potentially in the losers bracket in play-ins.